Hey everyone, I know we're in the middle of winter slumber right now, but it is time for the Power Alley podcast and the episode here. We have seen a lot of movement so far in the hot stove season, from the end of the World Series through the winter meetings there in early December down in Orlando. It is January 22nd right now as I'm recording, and we have seen a lot of traction building up, whether it's World Baseball Classic rosters starting to take formation in preparation for March, or teams now start to really get the parameters around what they want their opening their roster to be and their depth in their organization. We got a lot to talk about here. We're going to dive into multiple things, multiple layers from the offseason perspective, looking at the Hall of Fame, World Baseball Classics, and free agency, some other topics that are coming into play. Before we even dive into that, though, just want to remind you this is the Power Alley podcast. We are a group, a effort of SpinnableSports.com and Spinnable Sports YouTube channel. You can find that. And you can also find X and Twitter for Spinnable Sports. We are the Power Alley Podcast. You can find us on X and Twitter at Power Alley Pod. And you can also find the flagship podcast for SpinnableSports.com, Spinnable Sports YouTube channel, and that is the Irrational Confidence Podcast at IR Confidence Pod. A lot of great sports offerings. This is specifically related to baseball, so really ramping up now here in January and all the way through till October. The Irrational Confidence podcast, all sports, but really focused on college football. I'm a co-host of that with my buddy Seth. And right now we are obviously wrapping up the national championship. Now we're looking at the NFL playoffs. So if you want to get some of that action and you want to start figuring out what we're talking about from that platform, hit us up at IR Confidence Pod on Twitter/X, or find both these podcasts, the Tower Road podcast and the Irrational Confidence podcast, on our flagship station, SpinnableSports.com, and Spinnable Sports YouTube channel. Today's episode, we're going to really dive into a few major topics that have sort of surfaced over the offseason. The first thing is spending, free agency, lockout looming. Is there a need for salary cap, salary floor? I kind of look into that a little bit. Look ahead to what Team USA is looking like for the World Baseball Classic. If you follow us up to this point, we basically went through in our top 26 players to make our own roster. All those players are actually on the current squad. We did it in line. We actually got a lot of the guys ahead of time before Mark DeRosa and that entire team, Baseball USA, Team USA, brains trust got their team in line. We'll look at the Hall of Fame class coming in. There's 3 guys that were elected. We'll discuss them and kind of look at who's next on the roll and maybe who's even rolled off. And then look at some major offseason trades and kind of wrap it up as well with taking a deeper look at the New York Mets, a team that it's either one end of the spectrum or the other, and where they've kind of maybe reshaped the entire franchise. So that's kind of the hits of this episode here today. A lot of big things happening. We'll first go ahead and start off with the salary cap and salary floor and how kind of the offseason movements that have happened. As of yesterday, the Brewers traded Freddie Peralta to the New York Mets. And that has become a universal trend now for the Brewers of seeing a guy who's about to be, hitting the free agent market at a high price tag, and the Brewers trade him. And they trade him to get prospects and develop them. They draft well, they develop those prospects, and they're still competitive. So we all saw this coming. With $8 million this year, could be like a wide end. They just keep Freddie for one more year, make a run at for a third straight NL Central, and make a run for the World Series and the NL Pennant. And he's striking out on top. And you have a prospect where you're going to get nothing for him except for a comp pick or whatever. If he leaves, you have no idea where the team's going to be. You're given a good offer. You're trading the Mets. He's on a 1-year run there. If they can find a way to resign him, that's great. If not, you get a decent return. You have a solid, MLB ready pitcher coming up who's 23, 24 years old. And obviously Jet Williams, he's the shortstop, slash center fielder potentially in the future, who is another top prospects. This is what successful franchises do. Unfortunately, it's going to lead into my next discussion about the salary cap and the salary floor. But these teams who are in small markets who don't have the TV revenue, owners still have the money, but they know these guys can get top dollar somewhere else. Look at Paul Skeens. 99.9% chance he's not going to be a Pittsburgh Pirate for life. He's going to either get his last year and they're going to trade him, or we're going to let him walk in free agency. He's going to sign somewhere else. It's just the way it is, unfortunately, and that's where things have to change. Another player, ironically, always these examples are from the NL Central. But Ellie De La Cruz, phenomenal player, the face of the franchise there in Cincinnati. He declined a franchise record contract extension in 2025 because he knows and his agent know what they were offering is not going to really compare on the open market once he becomes a free agent. So the Reds now we have to live and maximize our time with him, try to trade him if we have to at the last year or two, wherever that value comes best for our franchise, try to take those prospects, develop them, and keep moving forward at a holistic level. You want to develop a star, flip him, develop a star, and flip him. That's the logic of these small market, mid-market franchises. And that really brings down the boiling point for the salary cap need, what we're going to have potentially a lockout for this 127 season, where we've already heard most of the owners wanting a salary cap because there are certain players and certain franchises that are going to get tons of money and be able to get it wherever they want, and only certain that we're going to give it to them. A lot of this noise really bubbled up after the Kyle Tucker signing. 4 years, 200 plus million, opt-outs after 2027 and 2028. In his first year, this year, 2026, he's getting a $1 million salary and I think it was a $60 million signing bonus. So they're able to just pay him off on the side. It won't hit the luxury tax, but it just helps them manage their roster, and it makes the roster number look smaller, but it's still the guy getting his money. And only certain franchises can do that, and the LA Dodgers are one of very few. That right there, other owners, unlike the NFL, they're not on the same page. If you look at the NFL, all 32 owners, relatively, there's guys who have more power than others in that room, but they're getting equal revenue share of the media deals, of the, merchandise. In baseball, some of these teams, like the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Cubs, a couple others, have that media market or have that specific media deal that really drives their own revenue. It's not a universal spread. Yes, there is the NBC, the TBS, the Turner Sports, agreement, the Fox agreement, the Amazon, Prime Video agreement, the Apple TV, agreement. These little small spreads are starting to help, but it's not giving everyone equal share. And maybe what they have to do from revenue sharing is the top franchises who have the payroll, they don't get to touch that media revenue because they have their own, and the national media revenue deals go to every other franchise. But we'll discuss that, possibility and if that actually makes sense later on. Per USA Today, that's their October 13th, 2025 article, total team payrolls for the 2025 season. There were 5 teams that team payroll was under $100 million. 5 franchises at the highest level of baseball. On the flip side, 2 teams had payrolls of $320 million or higher. 4 teams had at least a payroll of at least $284 million or more. So there are 4 haves, and there's a lot of have-nots. That's where you kind of need a salary cap and a salary floor to provide a balance. Because the salary cap, great, but if you're not requiring the bottom franchises to actually pay, the top franchises are still going to be able to pay for the top players. It's just going to be more on a signing bonus mentality of off the market, if you will. Kind of just general throwing it out there. I have not done a million tons of research, but I've spent some time looking at numbers of where we're at. My suggestion for a salary cap will be about $250 million. Only 4 franchises surpass that number in 2025. So that 250 number keeps everybody in a general competitive range. But then you have to lift the floor to 130 million around there. 10 franchises were below that in 2025. That is where the real discrepancy is. Yes, the Dodgers do spend tons of money, and they can do whatever the heck they want. They have their Sportsnet LA deal. They have, obviously, with Shohei. They have Japan. They have the whole Asian market to really inflate, and they're already a national, international brand. They're going to have that money pumped into them. But we've got to force other franchises to actually spend. They've got to spend some money. Those owners are getting some revenue. The owners are getting luxury tax money back from the other teams who are actually spending above it. They've got to start putting it back into their own team. And that where also comes where either they have it, and most of these owners are billionaires. They have to have that money somehow set aside. Either they have it, or we need to find a way to get a much more unique revenue sharing plan. But they do have to sell, because if that 130 million, if those teams are actually spending, it means you're signing some of your young players to long-term deals and lucrative deals without immediately getting traded or going off somewhere else. And then you're not letting teams spend $380 million plus, $320 million plus, $330 million plus on rosters. Now, obviously, that number is going to fluctuate every single year as the market shifts, but you need a starting point. And that gives, if your max is 250, your floor is 130, teams are going to start spending some more money, players are going to start getting paid. But if you're going to the Marlins, you're going to the Athletics, you're going to the Brewers, you at least know I'm going to actually be able to get some contracts. We're not going to get in the craziness of the NBA where you have trash players on the bottom of the bench who are, getting paid $30 million, $25 million a year just for sitting there on street clothes. That's ridiculous. There has to be some sort of common sense. But this way, you force every franchise to spend. The money's going to be there. It's just not always going to be going to the Mets, the Dodgers, Yankees, Phillies, or Blue Jays. And kind of looking at the full spectrum of the 2025 payrolls to give you a better idea of what those teams were. The New York Mets had a payroll last year of $323 million and change. The Dodgers had a payroll of $321 million and change. The Yankees were at $293. The Phillies were at $284 million. The Blue Jays were at $239. And we went to the World Series. Everyone's like, man, the Dodgers have all this massive tons of payroll. Poor old Blue Jays. The Blue Jays still have the 5th highest payroll in baseball, folks. It's not like they were some sort of small market team that was, pitching pennies. They have money there. They have all of Canada. They have the entire, Sportsnet, or Skynet, excuse me, broadcast deal for the entire country. So they are going to draw in more ticket sales. They are going to have TV markets and people watching. They can sell and make their money. They have the franchise dollars, and they're doing it. The Rangers and the Astros are both at 220 mil after that. The Braves are at 214. The Padres are at 208. The Cubs are at 96. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the top 10 teams right there. 6 of those 10 made the playoffs last year. 6 of the 10. The Rangers were the Reign World Series champions. Right below the Cubs were the Diamondbacks at 195. They're the Reign NL champions. Then you have the Red Sox at 193, a playoff team. The Angels and the Giants, who didn't make the playoffs, have payrolls of 190 and 173. Now, obviously, Angels, you have a lot of money going to Mike Trout. You have a lot of money going to Anthony Rendon, who hadn't had a single at bat forever, but they still paid him. The Orioles are at 162. The Mariners are at 146. The Tigers are at 143. The Twins, Cardinals were both in the 140s. The Royals are at 130. The Rockies are at 120. The worst team in baseball has a $120 million payday. Chris Bryant taking up a lot of that, but $120 million. The Reds are at 115, and so are the Brewers, and they both make the playoffs. The Guardians, the lowest payroll at $100 million, made the playoffs. But then below it, who is there? The Pirates, White Sox, Rays, Athletics, and Marlins. The Marlins at $67 million in their payroll. Athletics at 73. The Rays at 79. The White Sox at 82. And the Pirates at 87. As we could talk all about the top teams spending all the money, but if these franchises down here, and I'm a beloved diehard Brewer fan, these ownership groups, they've got to spend money. If you spend the money there, you're not going to let the other teams go ahead and just overpay for the top players. You need to have a balance, and that's going to create, even though we do have a lot of parity and a lot of turnover, you need to be able to get players in big faces in markets and keep them there forever. Look at the NFL. There are players in every market that people cannot see their entire career. We aren't seeing the small market players stick around with their franchises for their entire career very often in baseball. That becomes a major identity problem. If you're trying to grow the game, baseball is fantastic. We're about to be a lockout. You have to worry about the kids. How do I keep the kids? If I'm not one of the top 5 franchises in baseball, who's going to be that one player that I see forever? Robin Yount. I'm using him as an example. His entire career at the Brewers. People who grew up in the 70s and 80s and near the 90s knew who he was. They still know who he's a legend today. You know, the parents pass it down. Robin Yount was the entire time. You need the face of the franchise. This guy's bumping around, not paying, letting him leave. It becomes a defeatist mentality. My one buddy, Seth, is from upstate, northern Ohio, around the Cleveland area. Diehard Cleveland Indians family who's growing up, Guardians now. He comes into it's like, we're even going to be competitive in June. What's the point of even watching? If I'm not living there and going you just go to a ball game on Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday night because there's nothing to do, why am I paying attention? Yes, the team's made the playoffs a lot and they've overachieved a ton, but it's not sustainable if your payroll is $100 million. You've got to find a way to force these ownerships and force these teams to pay. Another $30 million in that roster means you're going to have a couple players staying around for a little while, do some extensions, but you boost up that franchise. And that money will get spread across baseball a little more evenly. These teams will spend. But we need to have some of these teams start spending more money and force the ownership groups to do it. They're getting luxury tax money. They need to be spending it. So not only do we need salary cap, we need a salary floor to force ownership on all levels. And not just the 21 owners who are mad that the other 9 are big time. You need to have all 30 owners in the same boat, forcing to spend and then being contained in the spending. To take the argument, take it to the next level, look at the free agent signings so far this offseason. There's going to be a very similar trend to the teams that were the top 10 in overall payroll last year are going to have a lot of the free agents here in the list. Alex Forver and JT Realmuto both re-signed with the Phillies. Pete Alonso could have been a Met. He's now an Oriole. Orioles still on top major payroll. Cody Bellinger re-signs with the Yankees. Bo Bichette goes from the Blue Jays to the Mets. Both top 5. Kyle Tucker went from the Cubs to the Dodgers. Evan Diaz, Mets to the Dodgers. Alex Bregman, he was in Boston. Now he's a Cub. Robert Suarez was in San Diego. Now he's a Brave. Michael King stays in San Diego. Dylan Cease goes from San Diego to Toronto. Devin Williams goes from the Yankees to the Mets. Ranger Suarez, Phillies to the Red Sox. Josh Naylor, he got acquired in a trade to Seattle from Cleveland. He's re-signed with the Mariners. They were more middle before. That's one of the rares for those more middle long. The White Sox, I'm very proud. They signed the stud third baseman Murakami from Japan. They spent some money. The same teams are getting the same top free agents. In the NFL, it doesn't always work that way. And the NFL is built on parity, and every team has a chance when you come into it. We all talk about spring training and new hope and renewal. The Marlins had a great year last year. They showed a lot of growth in a lot of young players. They're doing very similar to what the Brewers have done, where you develop the young players and let them all come up at the same time. But is after a 1 year run, and the guy gets closer to free agency, you're going to trade him off for his value, or are you going to re-sign him, build a team around those guys? Keep an eye on the remaining free agents out there. Some of the top ones: Eugenio Suarez, Framber Valdez, Luis Ariz, Zach Gallen, Chris Bassett, Lucas Giolito. Now, Lucas Giolito's kind of fallen off, and Zach Gallen's kind of fallen off, but they are more mid to late. I'll say more back end rotation pitchers. Everyone needs pitching. For those six guys, watch where they all end up. Rise led the National League in hits with 181 hits, has more walks than Ks in 2025, and he's still a free agent. The dude just gets on base. I don't care if he's not hitting, he's not hitting 35 home runs. He might hit 4, but the fact that he's still unsigned is ridiculous. Where these free agents sort of, rest of them filter out, you're going to really see a trend. If it's all going to the top market teams, bottom teams aren't even trying to spend money. And it's a shame. I'm a Brewers fan. I love how they draft and develop. They take, reclamation projects, and they show the entire organizational depth from the very day you're drafted through the pitching lab and everything gets you up to speed and have you perform at a high level. But at some point, you want to see those guys stick around. I love Brandon Woodruff. In fact, yes, his injury hurt him, but the fact that he can be a Brewer for life is really, really cool. But you want to see more of it. Like Corbin Burns, developed by the Brewers, he's gone. Josh Hader comes over, becomes an electric closer, gone. Willie Adames, he went to Milwaukee from the Rays, had an entire revitalization of his entire career. They already knew he's priced out of it. We gotta let him go. I'm happy they locked up Jackson Churio for that long-term deal, but at some point, when he becomes a free agent, are they going to be able to afford him the next time when he's almost 30 years old? He's going to get paid, and the Brewers aren't going to be able to pay him. So you have to enjoy the time you have because it's going to change real quick. And if you're not drafting and developing, you've got to overpay for a player who's out of it, or your team is going to be always in the bottom because you can't. You're trying to just take crapshoots on prospects and hoping they develop as well. So it has to be a floor to force teams to spend, especially extend. It doesn't have to be free agency, but extending your own players, keeping guys in house, building up that camaraderie between the fan base and the organization. That right there also helps push forward. I know so-and-so is going to be here for a long, long time. A Brewer, a Cub, a Royal, a Guardian, a Twin, a Rocky for life. That's what you want. The Athletics signing all the young players right now. You kind of hope that some of those athletics are athletics for life, not just get me to Vegas, and when Vegas takes over, we send them off. We just want to build excitement. You want them to be athletics for life. Enough talking about that. We can dive into that multiple times as we go forward in future episodes. Next time, I'm really looking is look at Team USA. Taking shape to the World Baseball Classic. The official squad, the final 30-man roster has to be completed and locked in by March 5th, the first day. Not a full 30 yet. We're still late January. We're going to get towards spring training. Technically 6 open spots, but if guys get hurt or somebody backs out, you can still have time to adjust your roster because a lot of these nation's teams are going to be filled with major league and minor league players. Right now, Team USA's roster: Aaron Judge, Corbin Carroll, Byron Buxton in the outfield. I had all 3 of those early on our previous episodes locked in well before Marky Russell did, so maybe you can be listening to us. Pete Crow Armstrong is also on the squad. You look at Alex Bregman, Gunnar Henderson, Bobby Witt Jr., Bryce Terang, Ernie Clement. That 5 right there in the infield, very solid defensively as well. Bobby Witt short, Bryce Terang at second, Alex Bregman potentially at third, or Gunnar Henderson at third. You're going to see defense, not giving up tons of junk hits, not giving up extra bases, guys playing smart and getting outs. The 2 catchers are pretty easy. Cal Raleigh and Will Smith, 2 best catchers in the game. And Kyle Schwarber, the designated hitter, dude's a thunder bat in the middle line. You can put him in every. You probably have him lead off. I think that's all you're going to have to do. You have him hit in front of Aaron Judge. Good luck. Who I want them to add to this lineup, I think we're pretty solid. But add Mookie Betts because he can play short, he can play second, so he gives you that infield outfield flexibility. Bryce Harper, another left-handed bat. You can come off the bench. You can be a DH. You can play first. Riley Green can play all outfield spots. That gives you 5 outfielders if you really want to go that way and rotate the guys. Because remember, this is also spring training. They're competing for a World Baseball Classic title. It's still spring training. Guys are getting ramped up. They all need some playing time. They need some at-bats. They need some swings. They need some action, game action. They're having to ramp up and play at a high level much earlier than normal. Usually you have the entire month, spring training being most of February and all of March to get ready for opening day at the end of March. Now these boys have got to be ready to rock and roll March 5th and be ready to play through the 25th. And then opening day happens 4 or 5 days later. So if these guys are going to have to get at bats, they're going to have to get involved. You're going to have to rotate lineups every single day through full play and get your guys some experience. It's also winning, but you also know it's kind of spring training guys getting ready to go. It's also on the same side from the pitching perspective. Paul Skeens, Terrence Skubal, Logan Webb. I had all 3 of them on my roster, as well as Griffin Jackson, Mason Miller, and bullpen. The official team has Skeens, Skubal, Webb, Joe Ryan, Clay Holmes, Griffin Jackson, Brad Keller, Clayton Kershaw making the last for us, Noel McLean from the Mets, left-hander Gabe Spear, and then David Bednar. They have to have a minimum of 14 pitchers. They have 12 right now. What I would love to see is Tyler Rogers, who just signed a deal with the Twins. A nice lefty out of the bullpen. You need that. Josh Hader is another fastball fire lefty out of the bullpen. I would love to see him. And then Garrett Crochet. You bring him in, he has great speed, great control. He's that funky delivery. Get up, you can start for you, can be middle, long relief. It gives you a lot of opportunities for this entire pitching staff. We'll see what Mark DeRosa and the entire Team USA squad have in store. This team is coming together. This is a loaded team, and there is nothing less than winning this championship. This year, in 2023, playing Japan in the final, it came close, you just couldn't get it done. Now you've got to go out there and get the title. You did it in 19. You got to go out and get it done now. We'll talk a little bit more. Look at the other rosters in our next couple episodes of World Baseball Classic. Was Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Venezuela. There's so much talent. Mexico, Canada. These rosters are going to be loaded, and the momentum that we're seeing from the World Baseball Classic and the top players of these countries playing is fantastic. And it also leads me to one point early in the offseason. Rob Manfred's like, we should have an in-season tournament like they do in the NBA or like the UEFA Champions League in soccer. No, stop it. The World Baseball Classic is your tournament. This is what it's for. We can't have another tournament within the regular season. Stop with the nonsense. The people who run the game, and this is not just for baseball, people who run sports, ruin sports, they might hate it the most. Rob Manfred, you know what you need to worry about? Worry about the lockout, and worry about getting media deals that help every single franchise in the league, and maybe even providing some financial balance for everybody. Because right now, this stupid in-season tournament is going to take away from the World Baseball Classic. It's going to take away from the All-Star game. And it's going to take away from the playoff push. Some things you just need to leave alone. All right, I'll be off my soapbox. Speaking of other soapbox, the Hall of Fame. The most recent class was announced. They'll be inducted this summer, August, in Cooperstown, New York. If you haven't been, it's absolutely beautiful up there in the woods and New York. Absolutely fantastic. This class with Jeff Kent, Anthony Jones, and Carlos Beltran. Andrew Jones and Carlos Beltran, one of eight. Carlos Beltran, one of eight players with 300 home runs and 300 steals. Probably took him a little bit longer because he was connected to that Astros cheating scandal, so that probably was the reason why he didn't get in maybe earlier, because 300 home runs and 300 steals with one of eight players is pretty lofty. But you did something wrong, and the writers remembered that. But Andrew Jones, Beltran, both got him to 75% of the writers' Hall of Fame ballot results. Andrew Jones, more than deserving. That kid was an absolute stud. I say kid, and obviously an old man now, but he fueled the Atlanta Braves. Him in center field, run down. The rest of the guys were great, but he was a difference maker when he was out there roaming center field. You kind of look at the guys who didn't make it. I can't believe Andy Pettison's getting more votes because the dude did steroids. He was in the whole PED scandal, but he keeps getting votes. It contradicts everything else where all the other guys who did PEDs and were involved in the whole Balco scandal, all that stuff, they have basically been blacklisted. But Andy Pettitte gains momentum. He was the third best pitcher on the Yankees staff at best when he was there, and he was completely busted for doing steroids. You can't bust everybody else and rise Andy Pettitte up to the voting rank, because then it makes it look where's the difference? Because A-Rod didn't get in, and he's probably not going to because he used steroids. Barry Bonds, Mark Borgard, Sammy Sosa, all the rest of those guys, Rafael Palmeiro, all the guys, they're not getting in. But why is Pettitte's votes going up and everybody else is going down? It'll be completely eliminated. But I'm totally fine. If you pick a stance, if the voters pick a stance, they stick with it for everybody. Because if you put Andy Pettitte in, Barry Bonds did better than it. There's Barry Bonds' stats before he did steroids. When he was in Pittsburgh, were fantastic. Yes, he just started doing it because everybody else was doing it, and everybody else knew. But if you're going to put Andy Pettitte in, you're going to put A-Rod in, Barry Bonds had better be in immediately. With that said, another guy who's kind of surprised, it's surprising, but it's not surprising. Andy Ramirez failed on his 10th attempt to get in. You get 10 tries. It's his final year. He did not make it. Look, yes, the baseball writers being in charge is ridiculous. And it should be the Hall of Famers that are currently in. It should be some current baseball execs and some writers. But the writers deciding people's fate is ridiculous. And this is not just for baseball, it's for every sport. These writers have egos. They think that they're bigger than God. These are a bunch of idiots with a typewriter. Or they're like me, a podcaster with a microphone. They don't know the game as much as they think they do. They think they're privileged and everyone's bad out of them. There needs to be balance. With Manny Ramirez, the dude's stuck. Yeah, he might have been erratic. He might have been unique. He had his own flair, but the dude delivered. Not being on the 210 is kind of ridiculous, especially considering Jeff Kent's a Hall of Famer over Manny Ramirez, and I find that loud. Looking at some other guys who were still gaining some votes and gaining traction, keep an eye out for the future. Chase Utley finished third highest with 251 votes at 59.1%. Felix Hernandez close behind at 196 votes, 46.1%. Both have many more years of eligibility, so you can figure that Now that Andrew Jones and Beltran are in, Utley and King Felix will start picking up some serious momentum toward the Hall of Fame, especially King Felix. If I had to pick between both of them, I would take Felix Hernandez over Chase Utley if I had to pick one. Some other names just to keep an eye on. Omar Vizquel. Dude was a stud for the Indians back in the day. He finished with 78 votes, 18.4% in his ninth year. Next year is his final year of eligibility. I don't see him jumping almost 60% in votes. He's there. I mean, there's a lot of politicking for Omar Vizquel, but he probably is not going to make the Hall of Fame. And then David Wright, Mr. Met, captain, 7 more years to gain votes, but finished this round with 63 votes at 14.8%. He has 7 years. How can David Wright, who has some injury concerns, make a case to keep moving up? I'm not sure he's a Hall of Famer. You got to start looking at what is the Hall of Fame. What did David Wright do on the field? He was a good player and was there, injured a lot, didn't win a World Series. He's a guy. He's a good player, but not a Hall of Fame. It's kind of like the Hall of Fame of good. We want the Hall of Fame of legend. One last name to sort of look at, Ryan Braun got 15 votes. Why are you shocked? As a Brewer fan, I'm not shocked. His steroid stuff and the way he went about it, blaming other people, and it was all terrible. You knew this was not going to happen. He got 15 votes, which is less than 5%, and he dropped off for future ballots. That, along with many other guys, they were eligible. You have to meet a certain amount of votes. If you don't get it, they're immediately just removed from the future. That's actually a nice little turnaround. Ryan Braun's stats has the steroid connection. The I'm better than you. Maybe he's paid his penance by now, but the Hall of Fame, he's gonna like, dude, you messed around. You threw somebody else under the bus. It was shady. You didn't admit it. I can't put you in. And that tracks with the rest of the PED stuff. But the Andy Pettitte one is still the outlier that has me scratching my head while he's gaining momentum. We'll revisit the Hall of Fame as we get closer to August. We'll look at them coming in. We'll talk about stats of 3 new Hall of Famers. But all in all, there's a lot of. You guys are looking at the list now, and we're getting older. Like, is that guy, when he was playing, there are most of these guys now at my age. I'm 40. Is that guy actually a Hall of Famer? Like, when I look at him, I feel like, dude, that is a no doubt Hall of Famer. And I start seeing guys who are my age getting eligibility. It puts a different light. I saw them play. I saw them play against a bunch of other, every team in the league, what they did against the current era. Are they actually Hall of Fame or not? That's going to lead to some great debate going forward. As we move into some of the trades that have happened so far and kind of evaluate them, there's still one trade target that is still out there. There's rumors, and that's Tarek Skubal. There have been talks about the Dodgers trying to trade for Skubal and the Tigers not be able to afford him. And maybe this is time of him being a Cy Young winner and then getting the Tigers to the playoffs a couple of years in a row. Like, is his value sky high when you need to deal? That name through between now and opening day, and then even the trade deadline, if the Tigers aren't in it, expect a lot of eyes on that. And it's only you have to see where is he going to best be fit. Do the Tigers trade him to the Dodgers? You won't face him potentially in the playoffs. Or do they trade him to the best overall package next offseason? Do they wait and say, hey, you know what? All the 29 franchise business is open. Give me the best deal. Because there are some other franchises who have tons of prospects. A major minor league systems are loaded. The Dodgers are one of the Dodgers and Brewers are one of the few that actually are in contention right now and have top 5, top 3 farm systems. The Cubs have a pretty solid farm system, but they'd spend some of that capital to go acquire some players. If I'm the Tigers, you wait until you get an offer you can't refuse if you're going to do it. But to my other point, maybe you need to sign him. Find that way you can work it out. And he's going to be expensive, but commit to Skubal. Get yourself a franchise icon. See what happens. Some trades that actually have happened. As of today, this was January 22nd, the Nationals traded Mackenzie Gore to the Texas Rangers for 5 prospects, including the 12th overall pick in last year's draft, third baseman Gavin Feen. All five prospects were within the Rangers' top 18 overall prospects, but none of them were in the top 100 overall MLB prospect list. So, and the team being the second best overall prospect in the Rangers system. So that just shows you the Rangers system wasn't very highly regarded. But you know what? They have a very good major league team. And that rotation with Gore now and DeGrom and Evaldi and Rucker and Leiter, they're loaded. They had Hayes last year for one of the World Series. I feel they're able to get that pitching staff rolling and they'll be just fine this year. They're a team to keep an eye on. That Gore trade shows they're willing to and they're ready to get back to where they were 2 years ago. The Mets are going to hear a few times. The Mets traded for Marcus Semien earlier in the offseason. They sent Brandon Nimmo to the Rangers. Speaking of the Rangers, the Mets traded for Freddie Peralta, the 1-year rental, and got Tobias Myers as well. And they sent off 2 top 100 overall prospects back to the Brewers. Per OptiStats, that's at OptiStats on Twitter/X if you want to follow them. They do great work. The Mets are the first team to add a top 5 hitter in hits and a top 5 pitcher in wins from the prior season. since the 1903 New York Yankees. In 123 years, no team has added a top 5 hitter in hits and a top 5 pitcher in Major League wins from the prior year until the Mets did it this past, the past week actually. David Stearns, the Mets front office, taking a different approach, and we'll dive into that a little bit later as we wrap this up. It's not the Mets of the past. The White Sox finally traded Luis Robert Jr. Been waiting for that for a long time. He's a phenomenal talent, but had a lot of injury concerns, and we're kind of wondering what team was going to do it. Were the White Sox one to hold on to him forever? The Mets gave up Luis Angel Acuna, which is Acuna Jr.'s brother, and pitcher Truman Polly. Not the big deal; it's an extra arm, but the big prize was Luis Angel Acuna to get Luis Robert Jr. put him in the outfield. So if he can stay healthy, that's a big coup for the Mets. But that's the biggest question. Can he stay healthy? He had a couple 3-team trades, the Rays, the Reds, Angels throw around some, mid players. The Angels and Orioles. The Orioles get Taylor Ward to help supplement their offense, and they give up Grayson Rodriguez. The Marlins were involved in a couple deals. Marlins sending Ryan Weathers to the Yankees for 4 prospects. The Marlins also sending Edward Cabrera, stud starting pitcher, to the Cubs. And they got a big time prospect in Owen Casey, another outfielder. I think will pair up and play very, very quickly for the Marlins. The St. Louis Cardinals. Last year did not make the playoffs, but they are in full white flag rebuild mode. Everything has just fallen off there. It's tearing it down to studs, and they don't have many studs, so that's funny. Let's say that. But they are getting rid of everybody, clearing out the books, and going to just develop prospects and bring it up and let the young guys play. And earlier in the offseason, they traded stud Sonny Gray to the Boston Red Sox. In a separate deal, they traded Wilson Contreras to the Boston Red Sox. And then recently, they traded Nolan Arenado to the Arizona Diamondbacks. So they are gutting the entire franchise. All the young guys are going to come up, and they are going to be in full rebuild mode right now, and just giving themselves a sort of a reset financially that they've needed for a few years. They've been out of it, and they finally realized it, accepted it, that it's time to move on and reset and just ground up approach, because the Cardinals they've fallen off pretty dramatically. And it's time they finally admitted it. I'm happy they're terrible because I'm a Brewers fan, but I'm happy these people in the franchise up in the front office will realize that we had a problem. Now to the other argument of they need to spend money. They do spend money, but 3 of their best contracts are now off the books. Expect to see that number very, very low going forward. I talked about the Mets earlier. We've heard about the Mets a lot. In the past, what they've had the past few years, a lot of boppers. Pitching staff has kind of been a mess. A lot of injuries that have come at, in opportune times. We had Edwin Diaz injury in the World Baseball Classic 2 years ago. A couple of years back, actually. Sorry about that. But it's just, they have a different approach this year. You kind of add Bo Bichette, add Marcus Semien, add Luis Robert Jr., add Jorge Polanco. You already have Francisco Lindor. You have Juan Soto. Just giving some fresh lineup to this. Because the lineup 2 years ago, they were a terrible start and they made a massive run, make a deep run in the playoffs. And this year they come in with tons of expectation to sign Juan Soto, and they bottomed out. And they finished second, but well under expectations and failed to deliver. So we'll see how this change. Oh, excuse me. To see how this change comes into play. In addition to adding a Freddie Peralta and Devin Williams, 2 more former Brewer players who David Stearns took on at a young age, and developed, has familiarity with. This will allow him to reconnect and hopefully respark that magic with some of the guys he brought over, or at least has a relationship to. With that said, Edwin Diaz, they let walk. Pete Alonso, Polar Bear, who they drafted, they let walk to the Orioles. Brandon Nimmo and Jeff McNeil, they both traded out to just sort of reset them, give them a new perspective, and try to get some new blood in that lineup. The Mets spend money. Steve Cohen spends money. The expectations are always high. Will this grouping result in last year's display of failing to make the playoffs, or it will result in them winning the NL pennant? We'll find out. It's a long season. They play 1-2 for a reason. But they're trying to take a different approach. David Stearns was always a draft and develop guy with the Astros when they started rebuilding that franchise. He was a draft and development guy with the Brewers. Now he has some money. He can take on payroll. So now he can have a little more fun. He drafts well. He understands talent, develops the talent. The Mets actually had, prior to the trade, 7 top 100 players. Now 2 of those went to the Brewers. The Brewers now have 7. The Mets down 5. The guy they know they can draft and develop. They go through either the draft perspective, they trade for players, they do international signings. But now he can have the flexibility financially to go out and grab players and push for a championship. So we'll see what happens this year. There's going to be a lot riding on this entire Mets organization going forward. It's been a busy offseason. Hot stove has been, scalding hot as of recent weeks. Things are starting to pick up. We are about 3, maybe 4 weeks. Some will say about 3 weeks away from opening spring training for most teams. It's coming fast and furious, everybody. Baseball's almost back. I know it's freezing across the country, but baseball's almost back. Before we know it, we'll be seeing spring training tweets and spring videos. I'm seeing guys running wind sprints and, pitcher for, pitcher practice, cover first base, batting practice, guys running. It's just going to, interviews on MLB Network, all of it's on its way. And then we'll get to World Baseball Classic and we'll have this first round, group stage games, all the excitement, and hopefully Team USA playing for a championship. In our next episode, we'll dive into more of the other rosters in the World Baseball Classic, all the other players and where they're going to be. And we'll take a look more about the AL East. Where does it stand right now as we move forward and we sort of wrap up January and in February, and where the franchise is done in that division, and what do they kind of look like heading into spring training? Until next time, this is the Power Alley Podcast. You can find us on Spinnable Sports YouTube channel and SpinnableSports.com. We are connected to the Spinnable Sports Network on Twitter/X at Power Alley Pod. Spinnable Sports, you can find that at Spinnable Sports on Twitter/X, as well as our flagship podcast, the Irrational Confidence Podcast. You can find that at IR Confidence Pod on Twitter/X. Remember, Spinnable Sports YouTube channel, SpinnableSports.com. This is the Power Alley Podcast. Until next time, we'll have more chatter for you from the Power Alley. Talk to you later. Bye, y'all.